Thanks for joining us today. We're with Mark Surabian. We're at the ATiA conference today. And Mark, I've heard so much about you from my colleagues, but also just people walking around the hallway. And you've got a rep, brother. And the great thing about it is it's a very positive rep. And so what I'd like to do is maybe just kind of start off today. Tell us a little bit about your journey and tell us how, assistive technology became such a priority into your life and how it's working for you in that situation.
Sure thing. About over 35 years ago, I intended to be a history teacher, high school history teacher. Volunteered at a home for the disabled, and many years later I ended up being one of the administrators. And I think one of the things that bothered me the most is that these children never had a place to play. Most of the kids I worked with had severe physical disabilities and communication challenges, and so they never had a place to play and interact. And I just think that's an essential part of life, play. And so we started to modify things, make access. We started to realize that the world of play wasn't accessible for these children. And then, of course, we realized that academics was not accessible either. And I went to one of my first conferences back then, and the first generation of real assistive tech people for education, some of the real greats, and they taught us how we could make access to the world and how important it was. And so many years later, I end up getting a few grants to run a free clinic in New York City where we serve anyone from birth to elderly folks who need access. It's all about creating access for people in a world that's inaccessible. It could be home, it could be school, it could be work, and leisure, and so that's been our goal in the free clinic. I teach assistive technology at a few universities and trying to empower that next generation. But I think my angle now is, and my younger generation is teaching me this, after decades of inclusion that we've done across the United States, we now realize that we've created a community of young people from millennials to the Xers that realize that, and Z, that just should be expected. Inclusion should just be. Stop fighting for it. It should just exist. And the real question to these young people is, why did exclusion occur in the first place? And so now the real generation of assistive tech is not folks like us teaching the world about assistive tech. It's more about the people who need assistive tech advocating for themselves and telling us how the world should be designed, better designed. So it's really universal design, but going even deeper now. But there will always be a need for assistive tech because UDL is for the group, AT is for that one person to personalize it, individualize it, and really serve their needs. So I guess we'll always need a little advice from people that know this tech really well. But we should play it back. I think my role now is playing in the back and just empowering people to make their own decisions.
One of the words that you spoke there was inclusivity.
Yeah.
We have now state mandates that say you've got to include these kids, which is I think what
Right.
I loved what you said. The students are going, well, why not? But in that situation, oftentimes we have some neurodiverse students that are spending 60, 70, 80% of their day in a general classroom. And I think that's where assistive technology opens the door for them to participate. Elaborate a little bit on that. Are you seeing success with the states mandating that inclusivity? And are you seeing it, not every state does that.
Well, we learned from the civil rights era, you can't force people to be together and nice together. They just have to live with each other and grow with each other. So with regards to access, it just has to be there from the beginning. And the kids have to discover that it's not that we made accommodations for them. It's that that's the way it should be. So the problem is really teaching the teachers and the administration about how limiting our curriculum already is and our schools are, so that they can undo the past and create an environment so the kid just rolls into it. Kids shouldn't be taught assistive tech when they need it. They should be taught it from the beginning.
We're at the ATiA.
Right.
And what I think is exciting is as we walk around and we see demonstrations and we see the people that are bringing assistive technology, wow, has it changed?
Yeah.
And this opening of, even AI and all these different tools, Man, where do you think the future? Tell us about the future with ATI, or not ATI, but AT.
I think there's a lot in our wheelhouse that we don't know about. Like, for example, there was an area called kinesthetic learning. Now we're calling it embodied learning, where you use your whole body in space. Well, that helps kids with attention deficits.
Right.
So there are a lot of tools out there for VR, AR, and stuff that we haven't dabbled enough in. We have to. It's funny. We always have to keep catching up to the rest of the world. It's like, was VR accessible? Was AR accessible? Not really. But that's another avenue for us. So our field is just huge, and it's broadening and going different directions. But what's most important, I think, for our field is that it's consumer driven now. The consumers are gaining power, and they're saying, I want this to be this way. And the personalization, the individualization of every piece of equipment that's out there, so you can tailor it to yourself, is our goal. That everybody can grab a tool and go, I can make this work for me in one way or another. So I think that's what our future is. The future is this should be seamless, and you shouldn't have to ask for it anymore. You should just expect that it's built into your camera to make it accessible, or your phone, or to any device around you, or that a curriculum given to you in a school can be presented in multiple formats.
What's exciting you the most right now?
I think, I want to keep going back to, I think the fact that the world recognizes it's a right, it's a justice. That's what's exciting. But changes in the field, there's a little competition now between the commercial market and the dedicated systems. You guys are trying to stay ahead. And like, for example, word prediction. Well, in the dedicated part of our field, we're still better at it than, commercial devices are. They're catching up. They're adopting some of your tools. They're bringing some of your tools into their products. I guess what that tells me is the most exciting thing should be is that when we first started this field, that hallway for ATiA or any of the other conferences, it was small enough that we could all have a conversation. Hey, what does your tool do? And we kind of collaborated more. There's enough need that all of us can still make a living at the products you're selling and help people at the same time, where you guys can all collaborate and see how can we work together to make sure that our company can sustain itself and continue to make better products, but that you're pushed by other people's products to make them even better. I want to see more collaboration on a commercial level too.
I love that.
I'd love to see that.
Instead of this is my pot, this is your pot, this is our pot.
Everybody needs help.
Yeah, and again, I think that's so valuable to say, listen, we're actually in it for the people.
That's the best part of going here, right? Because everybody's really in a great mood because they feel like they're making a difference. I think that's a beautiful part of making sales, running a business, but doing it for the right reasons.
Tell me a story of what the most transformative thing that you've seen happen to an individual with assistive technology. Do you have one?
I
or
think
6? Or
I have. I've seen 5,000 kids in the clinic in the past 10 years. And I think the first thing I would say is the gestalt that happens when a kid realizes there's another path. It's profound. It happens to every child, from a child who can't communicate to a child who can't communicate verbally, to a child who can't, read or write legibly. As soon as they see there's another tool, something goes off in their brain. First off, where was this when I needed it? You mean I can do this now? And this stress is lifted and they feel like everything's okay. And the perfect example was a mom that called me one day. She says, we sat with you for an hour and I don't believe we accomplished anything. You didn't tell me what tools we should be using or interventions or so forth. But my son's happy. What's going on? I said, well, ask him.
Yeah.
And he said, well, because now I know I'm not alone and there's always another way to do things. So you taught him how to think AT. Now he knows that he can problem solve another path that is acceptable. And that gets to the deeper issue, getting over this stigma of how you're using something different. A lot of kids push back, especially middle schoolers. They don't want to be different. That's why you got to learn this stuff early. And that's why everybody should have access to your pens and all these tools so that everybody can see how they best learn. And the final example is my own nephew, who is in the Florida school system and was denied assistive tech all of his years.
Yeah.
We knew he had dyslexia. His dad had dyslexia. And they kept rejecting it, saying it would be a crutch as they read to him.
Right. A cheat.
Yeah.
Cheating. Yeah, right.
The things that happened to that boy as he was held back and emotionally, that this is the way I stand on AT now. That AT first is a right, Secondarily, it reveals potential, otherwise not seen. A friend of mine, Pitar Japay, she's a lawyer in New York who's severely dyslexic, as she says. She says that it helps me work at my intellectual level, not my decoding level. So it reveals potential. When I had my internet cafe in Harlem years ago, it was accessible. And I noticed that there were some members of gangs that would come into my cafe, and I was a bit anxious. And I'd see that they go to the back and they would use my reading software. These kids were teaching themselves how to read. People never want to stop learning. They want to have that control over their lives. These gang members were quietly saying, Mark, can I use the reading software? Teaching themselves how to read so they could get jobs and not have to do the life they chose. It was really a wild thing. And now that I see you guys going to prison systems with so many people with learning disabilities and other types of challenges, and these folks would still like to read or interact with the world in a different way. So it's not just children. So many adults that just want more for their lives. You know?
And I think assistive technology opens that door up
It does.
to even have that vision. And that's exciting. Mark, I love talking with you. I can sit and do this all day. Any other thoughts? Any other moments that you want to share with us?
I guess I'm just glad that all those years of inclusion that we promoted in my generation have paid off in the sense that this generation now really believes that this is just a justice issue. It's just the way the world should be.
It should be the new norm.
They accept it as
the
a
new
norm.
norm. Yeah.
We thought it was something we were fighting for. They're like, we shouldn't be fighting. It should just be the norm. So we've gotten to a place where it's acceptable and everybody picks their own path. It advocates for themselves.
How are people affording it?
That's the hardest part. I think school systems can find, through ATiA funds and other funds, can find a lot of these, they have a lot of other government funds that they can tap. They have to know how to use those monies effectively. They also have to, see how, from a school system, I think we figured out a way. I think it's more problematic when a kid goes to college. They have to tap the state systems and figure out if there's a way to get support or if the college itself has those tools. And then most importantly, in the working world, they're kind of on their own unless offices or other types of state groups can support them. It's really hard as you get older, I think, to support your assistive tech need, which is why we hope more of these things become integrated in everyday products.
Right. And we're seeing legislation that is mandating businesses to make provisions.
That's good to see.
In some of those things. So, the Disabilities Act, where businesses now kind of have to, we met with a union a little while ago, and they were talking about that being a very important thing for them to be aware of, because they're being required to provide tools to support some neurodiversity inside of their businesses.
I mean, my oldest nephew is also dyslexic, interesting enough, and he runs his own business. He was a union man, and if it wasn't for the accessibility features built into the technology he was using, he wouldn't have thrived. And so it's not just colleges; it's all all post-secondary activities and trainings for kids. That we have an automotive school in New York City. From what the teachers tell me, 60% of the kids there have reading challenges. Well, their skill sets are in robotics and automotive, but that doesn't mean they can't use tools to also read the literature and the information, the research about that. So those kids deserve access. I don't think anybody should leave secondary education in the United States without either the skills or a tool. It should be a promise. You won't leave here without being able to access text in the world, one or the other. We just don't want to admit that we failed them. But not everybody necessarily learns to read even with the best interventions. Everybody's so different. But everybody has an ability to take in text. And we have to promise that we'll give them one or the other. It's essential.
We just want to say thank you for joining us today.